House Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and nice to be with the Minister of Agriculture and Budget Estimates. Congratulations on your appointment. I just have a few questions, time for a few questions today. Wanting to ask about ALC enforcement on Vancouver Island. I've been told by a number of people that, that there is currently no enforcement of the ALC on Vancouver Island, and perhaps either you could, the minister could either confirm that, and if there is indeed enforcement capacity, perhaps the minister can provide some context as to what that capacity is.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, the ALC Island Compliance Officer position is vacant, and the ALC is actively involved in a hiring process to fill the position. And in the interim, the ALC Compliance Supervisor is responding and providing coverage.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been getting reports that very little enforcement action is happening, and so I think that it's just important. I'm not going to ask the Minister another question about this. I think the point of the question was to clarify that, and then clearly there's a gap that needs to be filled, and so my hope is that this should be good enough to pass the message along that the enforcement is not occurring as it should. I'm going to move to the abattoir on Salt Spring Island. It's a volunteer board-run community asset. Actually, it's a facility that the former minister and I met early on after the election in 2017, and they have been struggling with the business model as it is, struggling to be able to provide a service to a wide variety of to support a wide variety of farms, and a wide variety of animals are prepared there. And I reached out to the ministry to ask if there are any support programs for community-run organizations like this. This is, I guess I'd characterize it, if this abattoir isn't able to find a way to get support over and above what they're already doing, the volunteer, the fundraising, that it goes away. And if it goes away, then that's a community asset that is serving not just the island, but the surrounding islands, and indeed there's animals coming over from Vancouver Island. They're looking at a matter of about $30,000 to support them. Is there any way in the budget supplemental budget that was granted, hundreds of millions of dollars given to this ministry, and yet an asset like this, is there any funds available to support the Salt Spring Island abattoir, $30,000, $40,000 a year, in order to keep them going?
Minister for Agriculture and Food.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, one of the programs that's being introduced is from the new funding is the Food Processing Growth Fund, and that's a $20 million fund that abattoirs will be eligible to apply for. And so I'm happy to meet with you and get more information, and we can walk you through details after this.
Leader of the Third Party. Oh, House Leader of the Third Party.
Just
promotion
one. No,
for
I don't
a
want
second.
that promotion. No, I'm good, thanks. Thank you, and thank you for the response. Those are the exact kind of responses that I think all the critics in estimates are looking forward to. Yes, meet, let's talk. So that's good. I appreciate it. Just want to ask a question with respect to this. Might get into maybe the minister's perspective a little bit, but just wanting to talk about some issues that I've raised in question period with other ministers in the past, just around kind of the conflict between traditional food harvesting by Indigenous people and then Western agriculture. And there's, for example, many complaints have been made that we've got the perpetual beach closures for clam harvesting, a practice that was part of the wealth of the Saanich people as an example, and this is just one, there's many across the province, being impacted by runoff from farms and the impact that farms have in creeks and streams. As the Minister of Agriculture and Fish, Food and Fish, is that right? Agriculture and Fish somewhere else now? Well, anyways, this is the Minister of the ministry that was formerly responsible for fish. They no doubt, the Agricultural Ministry has an impact on the fishery. And the role that the Ministry of Agriculture should be playing in ensuring that, especially farms near fish-bearing streams or farms that are near estuaries, minimizing their impacts. What work is the ministry doing to ensure that we can protect all the food production in the province?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair. The Agricultural Environment Management Code, or AEM, is a regulation that was created in 2019 by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. The AEM code phases in nutrient management requirements for nearly all agricultural sectors over multiple years, affecting how manures and fertilizers are managed, stored, and used to grow crops. My ministry supports producers' nutrient management goals in three main ways. Number one, extension and outreach. 2, decision support tools. And 3, the nutrient management planning, training, and program development and delivery. And of note, just recently, we announced the Climate Ready Seafood Initiative, which is a $2 million fund that has now gone to the Tula Foundation for administration, to look at impacts of climate change and agricultural activities on the shellfish sector and seaweed sector specifically.
I'm just going to, I had one more question lined up, but I'm going to just shift gears here and go back to this, because I think the question that I was asking was, I recognize that there's a bunch of ways that the question could have been answered. The question is around Indigenous food harvesting and the impact that agriculture has on Indigenous food harvesting. We've talked a lot about this in the forestry sector. There's no doubt that forestry practices have an impact on a wide variety of food sources for Indigenous people. The agriculture industry also has dramatically impacted traditional food harvesting, right from turning our I'll give you an example of this. Wetlands that are in the ALR. Areas that we would, as Indigenous people, would harvest food, harvest medicines, harvest other plants for making nets, for making rope, for doing a variety of different things in our industry, have had the agricultural land reserve designation placed on top of them, and for 100 years people have fought the land for what it was, which is a marsh, a wetland, that left in its natural place produces a wide variety of things. But because it has the ALR land designation put on it when 50 years ago it was created, now what happens is it gets drained, it gets ditched, and it's great for farming, in a peat bog, and there's one example of it in central Saanich that I could use. But we're consistently fighting the land for what it is and what it has always been. And there was great sadness that was expressed by my late uncle Dave Elliott, Panatch, expressed by his late mother when that land was turned into farmland, and fought for decades, calling it something that it's not. And forever that land has been trying to get back. And you can drive by that land today and you can see that it is still struggling to get back to what it actually is, which is a peat bog, a wetland, stores water. And in fact, it's, as a peat bog, and as a marsh, it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal resource for the farms downstream because it holds back a ton of water. But no, instead what we do is we create a ditch, we've straightened the creek, we mainline that water straight out into the inlet with all of the runoff that comes from all the farms on the way, and then it has dramatic impacts on all of the other food harvesting that happens. So I guess what I'm asking the minister is, do we define food production in this province with just the very narrow kind of Western agricultural perspective, or are we willing to open it up and to recognize, and I recognize that this might ruffle some feathers, but really there's been food harvesting that's been happening in the waters and on the lands since time immemorial in the territories that have been literally set aside and made and rendered inoperable because we have been, in some respects, fighting the land, in other respects, modifying the land, hydrological efficiency, turning creeks and streams into water pipes. And the outcome of that has been that, yes, we've been able to attract Western agricultural production and get some food production out of that, but at the sacrifice of Indigenous food production. And so this is really a question about, in the minister's mind and in this ministry, where is the balance? Is there a place for Indigenous food production and industrial production of those products where we would traditionally harvest?
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to the Chair. Through the Chair, I'm going to respond by citing 3 different actions. The first one is, the member may know from previous debates that the ministry established and supports the BC Indigenous Advisory Council on Agriculture and Food. We take advice from this group on a range of policy and land use issues. The second initiative is the ministry has recently accepted a strategic framework around regenerative farming, and the vision, this is the whole, I'm going to share it with you if you'd like. The vision is British Columbia's food systems follow the principles of sustainable agriculture to continuously improve our lands, water, and ecosystems. And one of the goals of the work is Indigenous agriculture and support for Indigenous interests as it relates to both Western and Indigenous agriculture. And the third one is a new program, and it's the Indigenous Food Affordability and Food Security Program, which deals with food security specifically as it faces Indigenous communities. And the program's main objectives will be to provide Indigenous communities with opportunities to become more food self-sufficient, provide agricultural training and extensive services, and provide opportunities for Indigenous communities to grow and harvest traditional foods that are often at the heart of Indigenous communities. And all of these are very important to the ministry.